Welcome to Discover Indie Film. I'm your host, Jeff Howard, and I'm really excited today to have Daniel Amerman with me. Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
It is going well. So, by the way, I'm just going to jump right in and say, in Dan's introduction, that this is one of my quickest turnarounds ever. Daniel's film, The Poet, was at Filmvasion LA in June of 2022, and this is now August 2022, so I think less than 2 months you're here. And some people have been that quick, but also your film, The Poet, which I have it written down here so I can say it, took home 2 awards at Filmvasion LA in 2022. It took home Outstanding Short Film for Experimental Art House and Outstanding Performance by an Individual for Experimental Art House, which was you as the lead character of your film. And the exciting thing, the thing that I was implying, is that The Poet is going to be in the Discover Indie Film TV series.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that too.
I could not be more excited about that. As you know, I embarrassed myself talking with the mixers by saying, by the way, like, your film is like, has always kicked my ass. It's just one of my favorites. So literally, picture this. There was some dude in his 50s watching 800 films in like a 3-month period, and then he sees yours and goes, oh man, I hope the person who made that is going to want to be in the TV series. And then you did.
Yeah. Well, it's so meaningful to hear that kind of stuff. And it meant a lot for me even when we were at the festival screening itself, all the nice things that you said. Because, you know, when you make these things, maybe your friends and family see them, but it's very rare that you get strangers to see your short film unless you just put it on YouTube or something like that, or Vimeo. So to have someone that you don't know and who isn't like invested in you because they're your dad to say nice things, it really does remind you that when you make stuff, eventually people might connect with it. And it's not just you by yourself in your room hoping, you know, it's not so self-indulgent when you realize, oh, it actually does connect with someone.
Absolutely. And I mean, the category you entered in was Art House Experimental. By the way, we're already talking about The Poet, and I'm going to make us back up and talk about your history. But I mean, also, I would imagine it's kind of nerve-wracking to make a film as bold as The Poet and like as unique, and like you even made fun, not made fun of it, but like in your description, you gave the festival. I believe you said, I actually have it in front of me. A young man has written a 3-line poem that he believes possesses great existential significance in various ways, and he's going to explain all of them for a really long time. It's like you kind of made fun of your length.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying to just have fun with it, first of all, and not take it too seriously. But then I also think when you're making any sort of film or art project that is efforting to be artistic, and you know that it's not going to be, you hope it's entertaining, but it's not, you weren't creating it explicitly for entertainment. It's meant to be art. And so whenever you're making that as your goal, you definitely risk coming across as pretentious. And especially if you wrote and directed the thing and also acted in it, you really risk becoming very pretentious and self-indulgent. So I tried to just be like hyper casual with whatever I could, to just be like, hey, like, this is a comedy. This isn't, I'm not this guy, or, you know, I just didn't want to be off-putting, but I still wanted to try to explore. I wanted the experience of watching the movie to be a little bit off-putting, but I didn't want anyone to then think poorly about the people who made it. You know what I mean? Totally
understandable. All right, so we've done that a little early, but we're going to come back to The Poet. But I'm going to tell people right now, I think by the time this podcast comes out, you will be able to watch it. So if you go to Amazon Prime Video, search for Discover Indie Film, it's going to be in season 6. And my hunch is, by the way, I always like to sort of lead with the funny stuff, because I learned after the first season or two that when you put together a TV series season, you got to start with some of the fun stuff, because if you start with the heart-wrenching shit, you lose a lot of people.
You have to hook them.
Yeah. You got to hook people with entertainment first. And so I consider The Poet very. So I am predicting The Poet is going to be within the first 3 episodes. That's my prediction. But you just have to go to Prime Video, search for Discover Indie Film, and just actually watch the whole season, because everything is really, really good. All right. So we've done that. We've done a much longer chat at the top, just sort of about current events. But now we're gonna hop in the time machine. Or that's a dumb thing to say.
Let's go back.
I'm just gonna ask you, what got you? I do know that you're a performer, and also you write, you directed this. So what were your inspirations that got you into the arts?
Well, yeah, I'm fairly new to writing and directing in the last few years. I've written some short stories and things like that, and done some like theater directing in school. But primarily my background is as an actor, and writing this short film and making this short film was it started as a way to think about how I could not have to wait to get cast and make something that was more in line with the type of stuff that I was thinking about at this point in my life, which is different somewhat than, like, my age in real life is different than the age I play. So for a long time, I was like, throughout all my late 20s, I was still playing like high school and
right.
And
you got the Michael J. Fox
I
thing
look young.
going.
So there was all the time where I was thinking about, like, adult things, like trying to figure out, should I get married one day, or do I want kids, or just whatever adult things that you have to kind of make those decisions about. But the parts I were playing were like I hope I get my first kiss soon. And I was like, what am I doing? This is just so not in line with what I think about. And so it made sometimes what you hope will feel artistic, in acting and things, it made it feel more transactional. Like I was acting in other people's stuff, and I was happy to do it, and I enjoyed the process, but it didn't feel artistic because it didn't feel like it had anything to do with my current life. So I was frustrated with that. So I started trying to experiment with writing and directing. But the acting stuff started when I was in 8th grade.
And where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, right outside of Philly. And I had been playing sports and doing tons of martial arts, and I was very into basketball, even though I was very short. And I just loved sports growing up. And at a certain point, probably in like 7th grade, I was like, I don't know if the NBA is going to be calling for me. I just don't know. So I was looking for other activities that I could maybe do going into high school. And I had a teacher who taught like a middle school elective called communication skills, which we had to do like little speeches, and we had to do some things where we would have to pretend to be our grandparent and tell a story or something like that. And he pulled me aside after class one day and was like, I think you could actually maybe do this. You seem like you have like a natural affinity toward this in some capacity. You should consider auditioning for the play and see if you like it. And then I did, and I really just kept going from there and didn't really stop.
That's huge, because I can still remember 8th grade. And 8th grade is when, like, whatever inspires you at that age kind of sticks.
Well, I'd never seen a Broadway play. Like, it really was not in my family's wheelhouse. My parents like the arts, but I guess we watched more big budget Hollywood blockbustery movies. We watched lots of movies and TV shows, but definitely never seen plays. So I asked my parents if they would take me to see something, and the following year, in my freshman year of high school, I knew they were doing Les Mis at my school, and so that was still playing on Broadway, so I asked my parents if they would take me to see that. So we saw that, and that kind of blew open my whole family's minds at once. And so my parents were like, that's like a musical. And before that, I think they'd only seen Cats, and then were like, we're not into the whole thing. They just gave up on the whole project. That was an
unlucky choice.
It was, it was tough. And then I think maybe they saw Chorus Line, which is still very challenging for a non-theater audience. Like, if you are in that world, it's very personal and specific. But if my mom's like a psychiatric nurse, my dad is a lawyer, and so they just found it all a little alienating, and they just couldn't relate. So for them, seeing something that was so epic and full of spectacle, like a lot of Broadway musicals have, but specifically in Les Mis, I think it felt more relatable because it was more literary, because it's based on a book. It just felt, I don't know, it just really brought them in. So then we started seeing all sorts of musicals, and we lived close enough to the city that we could go in there fairly easily. And I did a musical and a play in 8th grade and middle school. And then when I went to high school, then I did Les Mis, and then I just did a bunch of other plays and started studying it in high school.
And always with the high school theater department, or were you actually going for it and doing some auditioning across the way or anything?
Like professional?
Yeah.
No. So at that point, it was all school stuff, because I was also very focused on academic stuff. I was like a very school, grades were very important to me. And I wasn't sure yet. Like, I loved acting, but I wasn't thinking I would go to a conservatory, even for college necessarily. My theater teacher was trying to get me to go to a conservatory, but I was looking at schools that could still leave open the path that maybe I could be a lawyer or a banker or, something that a more traditionally academic path.
Right. So you were thinking traditional career, and this acting thing was fun. Like theater was for I don't know, just for fun.
Yeah. And I definitely took it seriously. And I think in my mind, I was like, even when I was applying to schools, I was thinking maybe I would be a lawyer for a bunch of years, make a bunch of money. And then like the acting thing was always sort of part of my hope or plan, but it seemed insane to kind of just put all the eggs in that basket. So when I started applying for colleges, I didn't apply to any conservatories. And basically kind of made a choice with that. And then, when I was choosing schools, I was applying to kind of the Ivy League, roster of schools. And Yale really stuck out to me because they have a very good theater program, and they just seem to care about the arts a lot. And all the schools did, but that one in particular. So I was very drawn to there. So that was like my first choice. And when I got in there, I was like, I'm going there. So that's where I went. So theater was a huge part of that decision, even though it wasn't a conservatory program. But then I ended up majoring in theater and English. And so around my sophomore year was when I kind of went, oh, I don't want to be a lawyer or do math classes anymore. Like I just wanted to focus on doing plays. And so then I just really committed from that point forward.
By the way, not to embarrass you, but I kind of I had to fight the urge to give you a soft golf clap for going to Yale.
Thank you.
Congratulations. I mean, that's a hell of an achievement that you got in there and went. Thanks. So, bravo. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
I think
appreciate it.
I don't judge people by where they went to school. If it's not a great school, I still know amazing people go to schools for all kinds of reasons. But Yale's a big fucking deal. So
it was definitely one of those moments when I found out it was like a peak happiness, joy moment, because you just think it's so impossible. And so when it was just a great thing to find out. And then going there was amazing. And, I had so many great friends and who were in the arts, but also totally outside of it, who were mostly just the people I was around were, some of them were into science or history or whatever, but they all just were so passionate about whatever they did, and they worked really hard. And I didn't find that it was like a nerd school or something like that. People always are like, was everyone just a bunch of nerds? And I found it was basically like high school, where you kind of had all sorts of different people, but it's just that everyone like tried really hard at what they did.
Yeah, it's a liberal arts college. It's not MIT.
Yeah. So you had all sorts of different
and they have an epic theater department. The theater department's epic. And I also want to joke that like you probably were one of the better basketball players in your freshman class anyway, right?
Well, yeah, they definitely are not the great. Certain sports they're great at, like a great hockey team. I think their lacrosse team is really good. Some of the kind of like the non-first tier
country
sports,
club,
club sports, exactly. They were really good at that kind of stuff. But yeah, I still played like intramural sports with friends and stuff like that. But once I kind of got into theater throughout high school, that became kind of my number one extracurricular like priority, until it then became the thing that I was hoping to do after college. So then I started focusing more.
Right. So during college, you became a theater major. Mm-hmm. You changed majors.
I went into college undecided or
Me
undeclared.
too.
Yeah, and then I think by my sophomore or junior year, I was pretty sure I was going to be a theater major, and I was also pretty deep into the English major. So I was like, let me just do both. So I did both of those, since
Which also feels practical, right? Like I could teach.
I felt honestly, I think
I'm a journalist.
I felt afraid to just do theater. And so I think, and my parents were like, we support you 100%, but it would also be good to have another major besides just theater. And if I hadn't been close, then maybe I wouldn't have. But because I was like, the classes I was interested in taking were about like reading novels or plays. So I just like took that to be able to finish it. And then by my junior year, maybe my sophomore year, the summer after my sophomore year, I did an internship in LA. So that was my first like LA trip. I interned at an agency to see if I even liked LA and because I was still deciding if I wanted to go to New York or LA. Mm-hmm. And I really liked it. I wasn't like more blown away by LA than New York as a city. I thought they were both fine, but I've always been someone who loved doing theater and have had a lot of great experiences as an audience member in the theater. But my formative artistic experiences have been from movies. Like they were the ones that most kind of just like, exploded my sense of what's possible in art have been from movies. So I was like, well, if I care about movies that much, I should probably go to LA. And also the type of acting that I'm most drawn to is pretty naturalistic and conversational. And I like stuff where I like stuff that's either very surreal or hyper realistic to the point where it seems like you're eavesdropping on it. And so that style of acting just fit better, I thought, with film. So once I realized that, I thought LA would be an okay fit. Then I started kind of orienting myself toward eventually making the move to LA. And my senior year is when I started auditioning for stuff more professionally, or even student films in New York, and trying to make a reel before I left college.
Yeah, actually, I was going to ask the theater department, the degree you were getting. Was there any acting for the camera, or was it purely stage?
It was purely stage. Yeah, I think now they might have some acting for the camera classes, but they were kind of hesitant sometimes to do things that were too career-oriented. They really wanted it to be like scholastic or some like an academic environment where you're still doing acting classes and you're still doing things that were performance related. It wasn't all like text analysis, but they were not giving you guidance on things like finding an agent or headshots or anything or auditioning. Like there was no, man, if they had like an audition technique class, that would be incredible. But that just wasn't their orientation in their program.
For sure. Which is telling me also that it was still a pretty ballsy move to choose LA, because obviously a totally theater focused degree really lends itself to New York and Broadway, right? So it kind of, it strikes me as a pretty courageous move to say, not like I've been doing stuff on camera, but I'm going to do that.
It didn't really feel that way at the time. Like I think I get what you're saying.
The joy of ignorance.
Yeah, I think there is something to that. And because I also knew I was interested in film, most of my people in my surrounding years in college were so theater focused that the few filmmakers on campus, when they would need guys, I was like the only guy who was like, I'm an actor who wants to do film. So me and like this one other girl would just act in everyone's student films. And so by the time I finished my senior year, I'd probably done like 15 short films. So I was just doing like short films for everyone. I started going to New York to do like student films from NYU and Columbia film schools. And so I had done a bunch of acting on camera and knew what it felt like to be on a set. So when I graduated, and at that point I'd never been paid to act, but I was just doing all these short films to get experience. So I felt like, okay, I have at least a sense of what it feels like to act on camera, and that I like doing this, and I like watching the result, and so it didn't feel crazy to go to LA.
Cool. No, not crazy at all. Makes sense. And so you get out here, and what happens?
I got out here and I was teaching karate and tutoring SATs and ACT, and
what are the advantages of having Yale on your resume?
That honestly was like the biggest thing.
You walk into Kaplan Center and say, I went to Yale. Okay, fine. You can teach the SAT or whatever.
It was extraordinarily easy to get hired to teach the SAT. And that was a huge advantage. Because I was planning to move to LA to be a waiter or whatever the kind of more classic actory jobs were, but you just get paid more per hour if you tutor, like rich families and, whatever. So I started doing that to try to have enough flexibility with my schedule to focus on auditions and taking classes and things like that. And I started doing a lot of improv classes too. I got very into doing that through UCB. And then I started auditioning for things through agents and all that. And started getting my first couple of TV credits. So then that kind of showed me like, okay, maybe this is possible. I hadn't like, broken through in any sort of huge way, but I started I had my first few experiences of getting paid to act, and so it was like, okay, I'm getting some positive steps forward.
Which is great, because I certainly meet a lot of people who are really talented, but I see their film at the festival, and they did it because they couldn't even get that first paid gig. So good for you.
It's really so hard, and it continues to be hard. It's not like I've like broken through. I mean, I think even the people that I know who I think an objective observer would say they've broken through don't often think of themselves as having broken through, because then they're worried about, instead of worried about like getting a couple lines on a TV show, they're worried because all the things they're being offered are not interesting enough to them, so they're worried they're going to get stuck on a bad TV show or something. So everyone at every stage has some anxiety about it, but it definitely it changes a little bit once you've been in something that people have seen. Like I did an episode of The Office, and that like changed two things in both good and bad. Like the good change was anytime forevermore that someone goes, "Oh, you're an actor? Like what have you been in?" I can just say that, and then they go like, "Oh, okay, I guess he actually does this." So that took a lot of pressure off. The downside is that most of the time you're not acting on The Office, you know? So any year or whatever that you're not doing something like particularly splashy, people are like, "Oh, so you're not doing that right now? Are you focusing on something else?" Or it's like you can never kind of win. So you kind of have to enjoy those moments when you have them, and then try to be at peace when you're not.
Yeah, you really have to just do it for yourself, because the measurement system just doesn't work. Yeah. I know when you were making me think of, I mean, I've seen huge actors just say the famous quote, which is, "You're only as good as your last job." Mm-hmm. Like, you know, like people that you think would be set for life. Like, I think even an Anthony Hopkins type is like, "I never know if I'm going to work again." You know?
Yeah.
It's madness.
And you're working with all these people. A lot of people, you'll be on set with them or doing play with them for the first time. It's more obvious with theater, where it's like if you're doing a play, most people in the audience are seeing that performance, and it's their first time seeing the show. So you need to be as sharp as you can for all these people that have never taken in that story before. But definitely it's true with the career of acting, where it's like, as soon as that job is done, you have another credit on your resume, so you're a little more validated. So maybe a casting director goes like, "Oh, someone's cast him, so he's not like terrible." But you then just have to audition from scratch again. It's not like normal jobs where you get a job and you just have that. You don't have to keep applying for new jobs all the time.
Yeah, and it's not like you're getting offers where you don't have to audition either.
Yeah, some people get to that level.
Yeah,
but no, the average actor is nowhere near
that. Doesn't happen for a long time. You mentioned theater. Did you do theater out here as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was doing. I still do about a play a year, I'd say, or I try to. I was doing like some music when I first moved out here. My first like paid acting gig was I was doing a musical that ran for like 8 months, and it was like the longest thing I'd ever been a part of. And it paid, I think, like $50 or $60 a show, which was also like, compared to most things which either don't pay at all or pay like $9, I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. And it gave me my first kind of LA friend group too, because we would just get to see each other. We'd do like 5 shows a week, and so we'd hang out all the time, and that helped me just have people to hang out with right away.
For sure. And were you doing UCB improv stuff too, the whole way?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was doing that.
That's a lot of bonding too, right?
Yeah, because eventually you have like teams and people that you're practicing with, but you're also doing shows with, and other people in that community. So that definitely, the theater casts, I'd say my main communities came from various casts of plays that I did. Improv was like 90% of my friend group, I'd say. And then maybe some classes, like if I did an acting class, I'd meet some friends from that. But so much of it was improv. And then as I got older, people stopped doing those things somewhat. Like some people keep doing them, but a lot of people then will be like, improv doesn't pay. I'm going to focus on trying to write more so that I could try to get a job writing for a sitcom or something. So more and more your friends stop doing that. And I think it's pretty common for most like young adults moving into the more like middling adult age, where you just end up spending more time with a smaller group of people as opposed to just having like the more almost like university style, like tons of acquaintances. It kind of got, now my closest friends are still people from improv, but now it's like, you know, my 6 or 7 like closest friends that we used to do improv with, as opposed to the people that I would like see at parties all the time. There's like way less parties now. So the community is much harder now than it was when I was like first, you know, getting into the game of doing improv and all this stuff.
Yeah, most improv houses, isn't it like a pyramid? Like a lot of people at the entry level, and then you start to realize I could hang around here for 5 years and not move to where I want to within the structure, right? Because it's pretty structured, actually.
Yeah, but it's sort of like any part of the industry where it's like a lot of people come to LA to try to act and stuff, and then that winnows out over time. And then if you're not making money at it, you go like, well, how long am I really going to do this? And if you don't just enjoy, basically, if you're not willing to do it for free, then you may just not do it anymore. And then why are you living here? And so it just, people kind of get, it just slowly kind of, dissipates. But I'd say that's definitely true with improv, but less about the money goal, because no one's making money from doing improv, but more about being on certain like house teams of the theater where if you feel like you kind of break through and then you get to be like one of the house team people. And I never even got to that point. Like I did taught lots of classes, and I did like sort of the almost like AAA sort of like farm system house team. But I never got to the level of what they called herald teams. And so that was always something I was like, oh, I want to be a part of that so bad. And I became friends with all those people. So it's not like it was worth it without getting on the team, the experiences and the friendships that I made from it. So it's not like the whole experience was a failure or disappointment, but it was, I'd say, for someone who was like the Ivy League school kid, it was certainly a non-achievement of something that I was like actively trying to achieve. And so I think that it was painful, but also I think gave me probably important perspective on whether are you doing something because you just want the carrot at the end, or are you just enjoying the process? And if you don't enjoy the process, it's probably not worth continuing and learning more about that kind of stuff.
I agree with that completely. You have to, I always tell people, if I meet people who are doing the acting thing and I go, well, have you done plays? And like, no, I'm not really, like, you have to just keep acting. You have to do it. If you don't love doing it, then don't do it. But you made me think of a question, and you tell me if I should ask it later. I'm going to ask it, and then you can just put it in your back pocket, which is, well, so I'm aware of your voiceover career from your website, which I think is a lot of people aim for that. A lot of people see that as a goal. And I'm just going to ask a nasty question, which is it, and I like cursing on this podcast because it says explicit warning.
Great. We got to take advantage of it.
So we don't have to worry.
Okay.
But like, how fucking awkward is it as good things are happening for you if you have friends and it's not for them?
Well,
or is that just like, just a dumb thing?
No, it's not a dumb thing, but I think I would say the complication is that, at least when it comes to voiceover, it is a very good thing because it allowed me to stop my tutoring job and to stop doing pay the bills jobs I didn't want to do. So now I make my living from voiceover, but it's not what I would like to be doing with most of my time. Like to me, it's it uses the tools of acting, but it isn't the most satisfying of all the different types, because most of the time you're by yourself and you're just recording at home. So it's very like workman-like acting. You're not rehearsing stuff. You're not exploring any aspect of the human condition. You're just getting a script put in front of you. You read it. And I'm glad that people will pay me to do that. But a lot of it's commercials and just even the entertainment stuff. Like the most fun stuff in voiceover is things like video games or animation, but even that is still not that close to the kind of art stuff that I find just most exciting, and the stuff that I watch and the stuff I take in that I would want to be a part of to kind of contribute to that world or that tradition. So even though it's like, yes, I'm glad about the money part or the making a living part, I certainly don't look at myself as going like, I'm killing it. Like everyone around me knows it and they're all talking. Like I am definitely not thinking of it that way. Even if people are, if they brought it up, I would be like, you don't understand what it's like for me on the inside of it. So I know that there's certain things I'm like so grateful for, but I still feel like I just finished doing a play a couple weeks ago, and that was basically like an unpaid play. It was in the Fringe Festival, and I'm doing another one that starts in a couple weeks that's also unpaid. And I did like a short film for someone a couple weeks ago that was unpaid. I still do unpaid stuff all the time, so it's not like I don't feel like I'm separated from the actors and people that are. I just feel like I have like a lucrative day job, is what it feels like. But I'm still on the same kind of like art struggle that most people are.
Makes sense. Yeah. Makes sense. All right, well, the natural question is, because I know you for The Poet, but so you're acting, you're doing this stuff. Were you writing for yourself at times as a hobby, or did none of that manifest until you reached the point that you decided you were going to make this film?
I would write things down just in kind of notebooks or in like computer journals. When things came to me, I just kind of jot it down, but not for any particular thing. Like I didn't really even have any particular writing thing in mind. It was more just over time, people would be like, you should write something, or you know, it's a very trendy to write something for yourself to act in, and people would suggest that as ways to kind of, you know, propel the acting side of my career forward, but I didn't really go that far with it. And then sometimes I would talk to other sort of filmmaker friends of mine, and we would spitball ideas for something or for a screenplay or something like that. But I never really took it that seriously until I just started writing this short film, and I think that made me start actually. I had written like some scripts in college, like from class, like I took screenwriting classes. And so it wasn't my first time opening final draft, or it wasn't my first time thinking of dialogue or characters or story. And I'd read lots of books. And so I was pretty versed in what's involved without producing a ton of work, basically. So the difference was this time I was like, decided to write this short film that was explicitly meant to be an antidote to my feeling of commercial work that I was doing. And so I was like very much trying to just do something where it's like, you may not like it, but you can't say I wasn't sincere. and that was like, that was basically my only goal. So when I wrote it, then the question became like, so am I going to make this thing, or like what now? Because I'd never directed a film, and I watched tons of movies, but I didn't know much about actually directing movies or film stuff besides what I had witnessed being an actor. And so I picked up a lot because I'd been on a lot of sets. So that gave me some advantage, and I felt very comfortable directing actors. So that was one thing that I felt like was an advantage. So that was, but I was very uncomfortable around the idea of like the cameras and what did I have to kind of like pre-work out, and gathering people to work on my project all felt very foreign and uncomfortable. So I started being a very like studious-y person. I just started reading like so many books on directing, and then one of my friends from college, who I did some of his short films, is now a cinematographer. And so I called him up and was like, hey, like, would you want to be my cinematographer? And he's just an amazing cinematographer. And he did it. All these people started doing stuff for free, basically, because over the course of time, I'd acted in their things for free. So I started assembling a team, and then just kind of like working up the confidence to decide, like, you know what, like I'm going to act in this because I want to. And the whole point of this is that I should be doing it the way that I think is right by my instincts, even if the people sometimes were like, for your first directing thing, maybe someone else should act in it. And I was like, but the whole point of this for me is to kind of to make something that I believe in. And also I want to learn about all this stuff and throw myself through kind of like a on your feet film school by just doing like learning about all these different jobs as I get to them. So even like in post-production, I was like, should I edit this? And then I was like, well, I've never edited before. So I was like, maybe I'll learn to edit. So I just started like reading books about editing and learning the software. And then I edited it myself. And it would have obviously been a totally different film if I had worked with an outside editor. But I'm also glad that I learned how to edit via doing this film. So I don't know. So I tried to use it as a way to just learn as much about filmmaking as I could to see if I even liked it enough that I'd want to do more of it. So that was kind of how that was the thinking behind even mustering up the courage to try to make it.
I'm going to jump back a couple topics because you just made it to post.
Sorry.
But
Sorry.
I was very inspired by what you said about your reasons for writing it and the fact that it was really about artistic fulfillment. I think that's one reason why, because look, I tell you how much I liked it, but hey, it didn't get the Programmer's Prize, which is the award that goes to Jeff's favorite films that the award juries didn't acknowledge. Like the award jury, people really love this film, and I think that is because there's something really sincere being expressed there, which is the antidote to commercial content, really. Yeah,
I mean, that's definitely what I was aiming for. But it's sort of I was kind of fighting against the commercial content instinct that's kind of baked into probably everyone just from culture. It's just so hard to not think of like, well, okay, like what could this film get me? Like after this or whatever, like those kind of insidious ideas that start kind of coming in that take away also from just like the joy of the project. And especially when you start submitting to festivals and all of that, it can just be a discouraging thing, because then you start getting reminded of, oh yeah, your film has a better chance of getting into festivals if it has famous people in it, or that maybe they would come to the festival if the film gets programmed, or maybe the film should be shorter because it's easier to program more films, and all these other totally valid business decisions that festivals need to make for their interests. And it makes sense, but it also is counter to trying to make something kind of pure from the art part of it. So I had to keep running into these decisions where I was like, should I just do what I think is right for the movie, or should I try to make a little concession in hopes that it helps some sort of marketing thing? And ultimately, I feel pretty good that I kind of just did what I thought was right. Like there were moments, like I remember going to submit to Cannes, and when I went onto their site, they don't accept submissions of short films over 15 minutes. So I had to make a decision of, am I going to make a Cannes cut? Like, am I going to try to gut parts of this movie to do like a 14:30 runtime? Because my runtime's like 19 minutes. And then I was just like, that is against the spirit of Cannes. It just, I didn't want to do that. Like, of course I could have, and maybe it would have gotten in, maybe it wouldn't have. But I was like, that's the whole point of like wanting to go to these sort of high level art film festivals, is to do something you really believe in. And if I'm just going to like cut the shit out of it, I don't like that. So I didn't submit, obviously. But there were lots of decisions like that where, I remember people and this is maybe one thing that I would do differently, maybe not about that film, but into future films, is I got notes from a bunch of people that were like, should you just put music over all of it, basically? Because a lot of it is me talking to camera, score it. It doesn't really have any scoring. There's one big musical moment in the movie, and I just didn't want to score it for some reason. Like I wanted it to be just like he's stuck in his head and it's uncomfortable being there, and that's the point. And I didn't want it to feel like this fast thing. But then as I've now watched movies after having made one, no movie starts without music. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like every movie basically has music in the very beginning, even if it has no more music after that, because it just gets the audience like, okay, we're watching a thing now. Like this is someone familiar. I don't know. It just seems like this, like a useful. It's sort of like if you're watching a play, a moment where the lights go down and the curtain opens, and you're like, okay, it gives you like 2 seconds to settle in. And I feel like I don't know if it would have made a difference in terms of people getting on board with the movie or not, but I was like, oh, this is certainly a potentially off-putting choice to not score certain parts of the movie. But I also was like, kind of, once I noticed that every movie seemed to do this, I sort of thought it was lame, so I intentionally didn't want to do it. So I was always battling those two forces, basically.
I'm shaking my head up and down positively for Dan to see, because I just think the start of The Poet is great. I think the fact that you start it without music, you are telling the viewer, you're not in for your average film. Hey, this is not going to be what you expect. I mean, I think that first shot, like you turn and you just break the fourth wall with the first shot, right?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the camera.
Yeah, you're just looking into that camera. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful because the whole point, I mean, short films are not commercial in the first place.
Right.
So the whole point is like, this is going to be different.
Yeah. I think if you're especially with a short film, because you're not hoping to make millions of dollars back from the short film. I don't know. I think you should just make exactly what you want, because it's mostly a training ground. I think, because you obviously watch a ton of short films because of what you do, but like most of the movies I watch are feature length films, and every once in a while I read short stories, but most of the stuff I read are novels. And I think most people who consume movies and books would say that. And every once in a while I'll read a collection of short stories, and it's really cool, and it's a totally different thing. But when I try to write, the times that I've written prose, I haven't tried to write a novel. I've tried to write short stories, even though it's not what I read, but it's because I'm trying to learn to write prose well. So these shorter formats make for much more doable training grounds, where you're not having to, take out like a giant bank loan that cripples your credit for the rest of the time because you're trying to make a feature film, until you feel some confidence that it's worth it, that you know what you're doing. But if it's your first time directing something, that's like the beauty of a short film. But I also think that if you're someone who is like an ambitious person, you can then try to make the short film like some sprawling epic of a short film, which can be good or it can be bad. So I get why the general advice is to try to keep your short film fairly short. But I also, in this particular movie, I really like long takes that aren't a bunch of snappy editing. Like I didn't want the movie to be a showcase of my technical abilities as an editor and a filmmaker. I thought anytime I started going to that, where I was like, ooh, like this will be cool, like I thought that was the wrong instinct, because now all of a sudden I'm just trying to prove that I'm smart and clever instead of just doing what I think is right for the film. And so,
right, and you didn't want to pull people out of the character's story, because if all of a sudden we were noticing directory tricks,
flashy things,
it would have pulled us out.
And his whole thing is that he's like by himself, he's anxious and overthinking stuff, and he feels stuck. And so from the get-go I was like, well, that sounds like either you should be really frenetic editing or really static stuff, because then it actually feels stuck. So I had to decide, like, is it anxious, crazy, like, blah, 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 or is it stuck? And I just like long, drawn-out takes, because I find it leaves more room for more of a poetic type of thing to come in when there's a little bit more silences and more time for an audience to think, as opposed to being told what to think.
Yeah,
so
let it breathe.
Like that.
Yeah,
I always like art that does that. So I tried to do that, but when you do that, it like takes longer. You have to just be okay with it.
And interestingly, that is what you used is underutilized in comedy, I think. A lot drama will do the takes where you really let things breathe, but comedy, people normally feel you have to be snappy, but you proved it doesn't, because I mean, like your basketball sequence. Now I know you could have made those shots because you played in high school, but you know, each miss gets funnier.
Well, the way that I wrote that in the script was because obviously I can't necessarily control like where the rebound is going to go, or whether I'm going to miss or make it. So I had in the script that he would say whatever he says about the poem, and then he would say keep up the good work, and he's supposed to swish it. Okay, but I told my cinematographer just keep rolling if I don't make it, because the idea, a huge theme in this movie is someone who tries and fails and continues trying, and I just thought that was, even I think the main character in the movie is sometimes annoying and self-involved, but I do think that the redeeming, or the part that I find most admirable or kind of beautiful, is just, I just like people that earnestly try. And so I liked that he tries to just do the cool moment of say the line, swish the basket, but seeing him miss, and then he has to say the line again, and he has to say the line because he keeps missing. I just thought that was so funny. So we did a bunch of takes with various amounts of misses. Sometimes I made it, sometimes I missed. I thought that one just made me laugh so much. And there are even little moments when he then ultimately, and I didn't plan this obviously, but one of the rebounds ended up pretty close to the basket. So then I end up just doing a little layup, but I say the line again from where I am, so I'm further away from the boom mic. So it kind of sounds like I'm further away. And I just thought all this was so funny, even though it was calling out the idea that there's a boom mic somewhere that now I'm further away from. So I had some friends be like, should you ADR that? And I was like, no, I love that this, it's not supposed to be real. It's not supposed to be realistic. All this stuff made me laugh, but they weren't jokes. They're not written jokes. So my favorite stuff that makes me laugh in movies are rarely, that's why I don't watch a lot of sitcoms or TV stuff, because most of the comedies, even if they're very good at what they do, I just like humor that comes more from characters or interesting situations where everyone's kind of earnest, and then something really funny comes out of it. So often the deepest laughs that come from me when I'm watching stuff is in dramas. I'll laugh so much at, or not even so many times, but so deeply at David Lynch's movies or Werner Herzog's movies. Paul Thomas Anderson definitely, but his are a little more overtly comedic, but that's the most overtly comedic that I usually, and I'll still go see Superbad or whatever and still enjoy it, but I don't know. I just, something, the laughs in a David Lynch movie hit me so much deeper, and not everyone in the theater is even thinking that it's funny or allowed to be laughed at. But I just love that kind of stuff. So I tried to just make the laughs in the movie less about jokes and more about just finding unusual behavior.
For sure. I'm going to ask you a question, but I'm going to tell you the funny thing, which is you would love My College Roommate, because we had a VHS of Blue Velvet, in the late 80s, and that we watched over and over. And he came to the conclusion that it should be in the comedy section at the video store.
David Lynch is really weird.
So he likes comedy.
Yeah.
Because of the thing he did on Netflix where he's talking to a monkey.
Yeah.
But then also, when he played a character on Twin Peaks, it was the funniest fucking thing of all time.
And so classic clown bit where he's just like I can't hear well, so I'm going to talk loud. It's just so ridiculous.
So funny.
But it makes the drama that he's also infusing in it so much scarier, because it's this kind of sweet, childlike world where these really dark things happen. So I like that I just like artists that go to different extremes. And I feel like he's one of those people that do that. But a lot of the times he's casting not necessarily comedians to make these things funny. He's casting either dramatic actors who take it so seriously that it becomes very funny because the filmmaker's making it funny, not because the actor is even making it funny. Or he casts non-actors, regular people who just are kind of unusual, and he takes best advantage of the unusual quirks that everyone has, but that sometimes to try to make something a little glossier for a TV or a film, you don't kind of lean into those. But I don't know. I think one of the things that, because I come at filmmaking, I guess, from an actor's perspective, the thing that's most exciting to me about filmmaking is that I get to put people that I particularly find uniquely interesting in the movie and go and let's emphasize these unusual qualities that I think make them so cool. An example of this from The Poet was there's this kind of side part in the movie where my character is at a club and then he meets this guy in this alley. And that's my buddy Luke, who I met through doing UCB stuff, improv stuff. He's a great improv performer and actor and filmmaker and writer and stuff in his own right. But he's also 6'7" and I'm 5'7". And so in most movies, and even things that I've done with him in the past, like doing his short films and things like that, you know, if I were to be in the scene with him, like I'd be standing on like a 1 foot apple box or something, or he'd be like sitting to try to make the heights. But I just thought, especially for that scene where he's supposed to be this kind of encroaching, aggressive figure that makes me uncomfortable, I thought, how great is it that he's so much taller and that it makes me feel so small, because that's what he's supposed to be going through. So, and it wouldn't necessarily work for everything to emphasize his height, but in that situation, I just thought it was so funny and so fun to emphasize the unusual difference between us. So that's the stuff that gets me most excited about putting things on film.
For sure, and that's actually, I'm realizing now that scene, that's kind of Lynchian, because David Lynch always did stuff where just a character would come out of nowhere and talk to the lead character for a while about something the lead character could not care less about, and then we feel trapped like your character feels trapped. That's very, I get your David Lynch inspirations. So the question I'm going to ask is going to go back, because this is my only chance to really talk to you in depth about this movie, right? So I'm going to, when you first started writing, this is me asking for an answer, but was it fun? Like, did you really enjoy writing the script? Was it coming together the way you wanted?
Well, I think that, so first of all, the way that the story even came to be was like years earlier, I had written the poem at like 4 a.m. in earnest. And then it was like in one of these like notebooks on my computer or whatever. And then every once in a while I'd go through old notes and then I'd come across it and be like, I know that's stupid, but like, I think there's something there. And then enough time passed that I was like, this is stupid. But I also I found the most interesting thing about it to be my like grandiosity when reading it years later. Like I thought it was so funny that I would look at it and be like, God, I just like wish other people knew like how brilliant this was. Or I don't know. I just loved that my own like. So
you
ego.
Didn't have that moment. You had the moment the character has.
Yeah, I was having similar, like not probably to that extent, but I think ego, or like when someone is acting egotistically, they're not noticing it's funny in the moment when they're having those feelings necessarily. But I think when you then realize you're being that way, it can sometimes make you laugh and go like, "Ugh, like I'm being so silly" or whatever. And I think that is so funny and so human. And so I was like, well, what if there was a character who just was like obsessed with this poem? So then it kind of started blossoming because I had this sort of self-referential knowledge. Like I now all of a sudden had a different perspective on the poem that I definitely did not have when I wrote it. And so that gave me enough where I was like, oh, let me see like where this would go. And so I did enjoy writing it. I think writing in general, like I really like the part of the creative process when you're collaborating with other people. So sometimes the solitary stuff is a bit of a drag or like a thing to get through in order to get to the collaboration part. But it also is really satisfying when you do write something or like a moment really where you're like, that's really funny, or you can kind of picture it and then something exists that didn't exist before. So I really enjoyed it, though I have had trouble sometimes in the time since writing that. Like I've started writing other things, but I do sometimes struggle with getting through that slog. And I think with this one, for whatever reason, maybe because it was a shorter project, it was easier to kind of structure it and get through it. And it's a simple enough idea that I wasn't having to deal with like sprawling characters and sustaining attention for an audience for an hour and a half, or those are like very different type of tasks. But for this, it could just be like, what do I think is funny? Great. It can be however long it needs to be. It doesn't have to keep you there for 2 hours.
Yeah. So, and was it a long process? Like, did you? I forget from the Q&A if we talked about like whether or not this was shot like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it was. It was shot over like a really stupidly long amount of time because I wrote the thing. I probably wrote it in like, I don't remember exactly what year, but it may have been like 2018, and then kind of started like that summer. I think I wrote it. That fall started doing pre-production and gathering people together. Then that winter we shot it. Everything except for a few scenes that I knew we were going to have to steal locations. So we basically shot all the stuff in my apartment and all of that. The scenes that we were going to steal was there's a quick scene where I'm in a swimming pool. There's a scene in a post office, a scene in a club, and a scene on a mountain, like snowboarding. So those we kind of just put off and we're like, we'll deal with those after, but let's just do like the principal stuff. So we did all the principal stuff. Then we did the stealing shots. So we like snuck into a club and got all these stolen club shots. And then we went into like a supermarket and the post, did all these things. Very funny. Like, anytime you're stealing shots, it's always really fun because you're like me and the DP and one sound guy, like got week-long memberships to a YMCA in like Culver City that was open 24 hours. And so we went there in the middle of the night and just waited for the pool to clear out so we could go in and get one shot of me swimming in the pool. So we were there waiting for like 6 hours in the locker, just like really stupid stuff. But you bond with these people through doing these things. And then when you get a shot that you're happy with, it feels very exciting. But then I had these plans to shoot the snowboarding scene. Originally, I didn't want it to be on a ski resort. It was going to be just like a sort of mountain hill sort of situation that wasn't cleared for skiing. Like they had bushes and things like that. And I went there and scouted it and I was like, this is insane. And it also had like down at the bottom of the hill, there were ruins of some old amphitheater. And so I was like, well, what if I started coming with these crazy ideas where I was like, what if then there's like a young version of me and he's like in the amphitheater, and then there's a shot that like in one giant like telescopic shot pulls up from like a kid like all the way up to me on the top of the mountain, and then in the same shot I fall down the mountain. It's just like crazy stuff. And then we get there the morning of to shoot it, and the night before all the snow had melted because there was like a heat spell. So there was no snow. So I was like, oh my God, well, I guess we'll just, so I sent everyone home and we were like, yeah, I guess we'll just have to do this next time it snows. And then it just didn't snow again that season at that spot. So I was like, okay, well now the choice is, this is one of those artistic versus like marketing moments. And not necessarily marketing, but just like, are you going to do what you intended or not? So now it's like February of 2019. And I'm like, okay, well, if I want it to be snow, I'm not going to get it now. So I'll have to wait until next winter. Or I could change it to like surfing or skateboarding or something like that if the point is just for me to fall. But it needed to be snowboard. Like it needed to be on a mountain. It needed to be like grandiose and epic compared to where he starts, which is cloistered in his bedroom by himself. Now he's in a wide open space. And I like the idea that seasons had changed, which you can only really see from snow. And I just needed it to be snow. So I was like, all right, I'm going to wait. I'll just wait until next winter. So in the meantime, I started editing the rest of the movie. And then the next winter eventually came, but there was a big chunk where I'd edited pretty much everything except for the very last scene and was just sitting on it. And people would ask, when's that movie coming out? And I'm like, well, I'm waiting for the snow. So then it gets to the next winter and it just isn't snowing at that location. It's just like the whole winter. It doesn't snow at that location. So now it's like February or March of 2020 and the pandemic is like 3 seconds away. And I'm like, okay, I'm making a small change, but in order to just like the movie needs to get done at this point, it needs to just be finished. So I decided to do it at a ski resort, and I was going to get rid of the whole like little kid amphitheater thing, which ended up being a really good decision because it just was way too complicated and too surreal, and it took the focus off of what it needed to be. It just like didn't make any sense for what I was trying to do. It was just too much. So we then did it at the ski resort, got this last thing in like March of 2020. the world shut down. I finished editing it when the pandemic started. And then I think in that fall or something when things sort of, people were like kind of seeing each other like at parks, then I met to do post-sound with my post-sound guy. And we kind of like wore masks and hoped for the best. But we finished the rest of it through the pandemic.
Right. And I have to say, I'm trying to imagine your original vision, but the tag you have, the ending you have with that ski resort is so perfect.
It was basically like, it wasn't actually a younger version of me, but it was basically like the two of them are in bed and we're like, oh, I guess are they going to break up or what? And then all of a sudden we're in the snow, but now we see a little kid playing in the snow and he's very present. Like the kid is enjoying himself and is playing and looking around. And we're like, wow, this kid is not in his head like at all. He's just, youthfully, innocently playing. And then it would just start slowly pulling further and further away until you get all the way to the top of a mountain where I'm up there watching the kid playing, and having maybe even a moment of like, wow, like that's beautiful. And then I just start thinking about the poem again and start talking about the poem. So it was another example of like something that should be beautiful and then getting like ripped out of it. But it was fine to not have that. It was like, it really worked out for the best. But like, we were pretty deep down the road of that. Like I had a kid like ready to go, all these things. So, but it was one of those happy accidents because even doing it on an actual ski resort ended up being so much better than on this mountain where I like might have like hit my head on a rock or something. It was just so much better that like a skier like skied by, and it's just, it's so much funnier to watch someone just fall down a mountain when other people are successfully traversing it at the same time. So it all worked out really, really well. But though that was like definitely happy accident stuff.
Yeah, it is funny, but also it's still inspiring, right? Because he keeps getting up.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, it would be fun to watch it again and count, but I bet it's like 5 or 6 falls. I mean,
it was a bunch. Yeah, it was a bunch,
and it just he never gives up. So it was the perfect ending.
Thank you. I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. It was one of the things there were in getting notes from people and suggestions. Some people thought the movie should have ended right before the snow scene, basically, like right when the girl has her monologue.
The end of her poem, yeah.
Yeah, and then it just kind of ends with the two of them like being separated, sort of, and that's the end because it sort of flips the perspective. But I thought the movie was about the guy, really, that like, and she's an important part of it, and I think that's the climax of the movie. But I thought it was important to see him fail within that relationship, and then to keep trying. He's still out in the world, still going about his life. So I thought for that, like trying and failing thing, it was important to get back to him. For sure. All right, so you wore masks to do your ADR and whatnot, or whatever post sound you did, and then did you wait for the plague to end before you hit the festival circuit, or did you start sending it out? I started sending it out like basically when it was done, so maybe I guess fall of 2021, probably somewhere in that.
All right, so you shot the ski resort. We
finished by around the end of somewhere in the fall or winter of 2020, and then 2021 is when I started submitting to places, basically. And yeah, so then that was kind of the next step, was like, okay, what do I even want to do with this now? So I've never submitted to film festivals, so I had to just start kind of looking up how that even process works, or how many you do.
It's a bizarre process, right? I mean,
it is. I mean, it's definitely, it's not. There's something broken about the process, but I don't know what the solution is. It reminds me a little bit of the auditioning process for acting, where you just go like, there has to be a better way to do this, because it just is so obviously most of the time a waste of time for the actors, where you're just like, I can't believe how much time I'm wasting on stuff that I never was going to get anyway. That there has to be some, I don't know. I just wish there was more of a weeding out thing where you're like, or if you were ideally, if you were getting paid for the time that you're working, but that isn't considered part of work. And then similar thing with like submitting to film festivals. You just spend so much money submitting to festivals, and most of them you're not going to get into. And you're hoping, you're basically spending money for the chance at getting screened. But I just don't think it should be that way. But I don't know a solution because the festivals have to cover their costs. And like, I get it. But when I look at, for example, I've submitted some like short stories to magazines. And so I've seen like what that process is like. And because they don't really have the same type of overhead, or they get there's fewer of those magazines, and they also make their money more, I guess, from subscriptions. Those submissions are free, but they take like 6 months to get back to you because it takes forever to find out if you got in or not. But you don't feel like there's like a strong chance that you could spend like several $1,000s and not get into any festivals. And you're just like, I sort of wish someone had just told me at the beginning that I wasn't going to get into any festivals, and then I would use that money to make another film or something. Because like, what did I gain? Just the hope of getting in? I don't know. It's just such a strange process.
It's weird and tricky, and I obviously don't have an answer. I mean, it is tough. Obviously, festivals do. Honestly, another reason why festivals, I think, have to charge is because if you didn't, like, you'd get way too much stuff, and a lot of stuff that's amateurish, that at least that dollar amount keeps some of the homemade shit out. Like, we've gotten some weird stuff where like somebody with a phone like just records themselves walking around the house shouting someone's name. Yeah. Like, why did you submit this to a film festival? My apologies to that person if they actually listen to the podcast. I think you were brilliant. It was the selection jury that didn't. Yeah. But it's all tricky. And just like, you know, it's funny when we talk about auditions. Imagine if they had to pay actors like a flat rate to audition. You know.
Well, they would see way less people.
They would see fewer people.
You know, so less people would get the chance to audition. But you wouldn't, I guess the auditioners wouldn't feel like they would never be wasting their time because they'd just be working. I guess getting an agent and certain other steps, like you can't get those auditions unless you get an agent. And you can't get an agent unless you've already done student films or whatever to prove that you could have a chance at getting some parts. So there is some useful barrier that makes it like, if you're a casting director and you're getting a submission from a reputable agent, you at least know the person is not hopefully going to completely waste your time. So I guess the money thing, it certainly made me have to think more closely about which places I submitted to and how many I was going to submit to. Because I think I did like a round of like, you know, maybe 10 or 20 of like the really famous ones. Yeah. And then did a round of ones that were either more local or definitely more LA focused, because I was like, it would at the very least it'd be very cool to be able to screen at a place where like the actors could come if they wanted to, or my parents could come, or just things that more personal, like it'd be fun to see on a big screen and with an audience of strangers and things like that. And then other ones, like the first round was mostly stuff that like would just, I guess, be good for your career if you get in. So I you know, tried for those, but I kept, and fortunately, like, I just kept thinking about people who had something really interesting to say, but didn't have the money to submit to all these festivals. And it would just suck if they actually did make a really good film, but then just couldn't really showcase it anywhere. That's one of the things that it's just a problem also with film as a medium. It's just so expensive compared to writing books or painting or, you know, whatever other medium where you can do your art for free. And that's just one of the unfortunate downsides of like this medium.
It is. I know a filmmaker who I'm now friends with, whose film was at Sherman Oaks Film Festival many years, I think 5 years ago. And their 90-minute feature cost them $6,000, and they spent more than that on the festival circuit. Yeah. You know, including one festival that kind of fucked them over and made them pay for a DCP, like, and paid way too much, and like, even though they already had one, it was that was unfortunate. But like, yeah, I mean, the idea that it costs you more to submit to festivals than it does to make the film that's. I mean, at least Film Freeway makes it.
Certainly helps.
I assume one of the reasons why you were, what might have pulled you into Film Invasion is that we were ranked in the top 100 best reviewed. So.
Yeah, I think I was looking for like best reviewed in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And so like that's how I became aware of festivals that I hadn't previously that weren't on my
because
radar.
people haven't heard. I mean, I'm well aware that people.
Yeah, it's a local festival.
It's not. And because we only do indies,
right?
It's not like it's ever going to be glamorous and reported on, in the Hollywood Reporter, because, there's no Hollywood stars. There's no, it's not like Tribeca where,
right?
There's the. I love Tribeca, but there's some independently done stuff, but it's really all star fucking.
Yeah.
I mean.
And that's, that's part of a business model, and I get it. And so, in some ways, there's a part of me that would love to be a part of it and to go and do those things. And you get to meet really interesting people, and you have like very large theaters full of audiences that are excited to be there. But you also, I think you have to, anytime you're going to do something in hopes of basically making a living at it, you have to make some sacrifices. Very few people make exactly the art that they would want to make and get paid for it. Like usually, even with my acting stuff, like I try to act as well as I can, but in order to make a living at it, I act in tons of stuff that is not the thing that I would choose to act in, but it's like how you make a living, and plenty of people are hoping to do that with filmmaking. And so I don't know. It's a tough thing, but I do think a lot about both with this short film, like now kind of transitioning myself and my thinking into the kind of post-festival life of it, but also thinking about like if I were to make another film, it is sometimes you can't think too much about the audience potential, because of course you want as many people to see it as possible. But if you're trying to make something unless you're trying to make something fairly commercial, or you want to be like a horror director or something that has the potential for a lot of people to see it, if you're trying to make art house films, like at the very, very best, not a lot of people are going to see it. Like the best case scenario, very few people will see it. So it's hard sometimes to get up the enthusiasm to like make the thing when you're like, how many people are even going to see this? So you have to find some reason to do it, whether either you just like working and collaborating with the people that you make it with, or you kind of go, okay, well, those small amount of people, that's what, going back to what I was even saying earlier, it's like, even just hearing like your nice things about it really is significant to me, because I now go like, wow, okay, so like this guy, obviously, and you're not even just like a normal viewer, because you see obviously a ton of short films, and so that gives you it makes it even kind of like extra special that you're someone who watches this stuff. But even if you were just like a person at that screening who came up to me after and was like, hey, like I gotta tell you, this meant something to me, like that really is meaningful to any type of artist who is not working on like a grand scale. And I remember like my girlfriend's a lawyer, and she's not in this world at all. And one of my buddies made like a comic strip that he was like like a zine basically that he was passing out to his friends and family. And it was great, but he just probably printed 100 of them and handed them out just to friends. So it wasn't something that he was trying to make money from or do on a giant scale. It was really just art for art's sake. And she loved it. And I was like, you have to tell him. Like, you have to. Because if you just silently love it, like, he'll be fine. He's not, like, waiting for your response. But that means everything when someone gives, like, unsolicited, like, this actually meant something to me. And it's encouraging to them make another thing. So your kind words meant a lot. So thank you.
And thank you for sharing that, because obviously I live in this bizarre existence. I mean, not that many people are watching the hundreds of films that I watch.
Yeah.
And then, truly just being grateful for the good ones, because I just think I love the medium. I love the medium of film. And I wish film wasn't so commercial. When you were talking, I was thinking, I used to say to people 20 years ago, when I was more on your side of things instead of this side, I was like, if only, if only Steven Spielberg made a nice middle class living as a filmmaker, like if only it wasn't like this pie in the sky draw everyone for the wrong reasons sort of financial reward thing. Like then maybe we would have more quality and a more meritocracy. But it's a bizarre medium, because like you're saying, there's wonderful shorts. And I mean, obviously, the reason I started that TV series based around shorts is shorts are so good. And it's so fun as a viewer to watch something that's, you feel your short's long at 19 minutes. Shit, we got so many things in a much longer than that. We created a new category called featurette that's now it's 20 to 60 minute films because, how fair is it for a 41-minute film to compete against a 9-minute film in the same, even if they're the same genre? So, okay, I'm rambling.
But I think along what you're saying, to me, and I'm sure there are people that have written, long essays about this, but it's just because in this medium, because it's so expensive to make, it has to make so much money. And because that's a huge consideration for it, it just forces it to be so commercial, which then it makes it, because it's so commercial, it then becomes highly publicized and people become famous, etc. Whereas before movies, like historically, actors were it's an embarrassing profession.
They were
like the lowest.
Yeah.
It was like the lowest of the low. Now, if you're like a big actor, I mean, it's just, it's insanely high in the hierarchy of like cool things to be. But forever it was not that way. I like to think if the world were still like that, where you still had kind of like these wandering troops of kind of like Bergman-esque like theater troops or whatever that would kind of wander. I think that I would still be interested in doing all this stuff, but I think way fewer people would be pursuing it because you wouldn't get people who are the most attractive person from their town that everyone's like, you got to go to LA and just like make a run for it. And a lot of them end up making really good careers out of it because most acting especially just requires like core basic competency. You don't have to be a genius to do most acting parts. You just don't need to be. So many people can do that job, but then you end up with a similar thing throughout like filmmaking and all the rest. Whereas in like books, you still have plenty of people writing like somewhat challenging books. And then you have the kind of like more pop books, but it's not like all books, coming out now are only spy thrillers. I think there's a much more thriving like literary fiction for artistic minded or adults seeking art or painting or whatever than film. It just feels like, I don't know, I'm sure it's out there and like your festival fosters it and other festivals foster it, but it's certainly like for me when I'm looking for that, I have to go back in time and out of the country. Like I have to go foreign film and old films to find, and there's fortunately like a lot to get through. So it's not like I'm ever feel like I'm going to run out of those kinds of meaningful artistic films. But I just don't turn to, for me, it's just like, I love movies, but I don't usually look to movies for entertainment. Like I love basketball for that. Like I love watching sports. That's like my version of, or like I like watching The Bachelor. Like for me, I like those things just make me laugh. I think they're light and fun. But when I like Top Gun and like Mission Impossible, those kind of like Tom Cruise, like mega blockbusters are very fun. But most of the other stuff just bums me out because I'm just like, God, this is such a waste of the medium. And I just wish that it was, I just wish there were more attention on the movies I wish more people were trying to make the type of movies that were being made in like the 60s and 70s.
It's a tough one because Lord knows for a minute streaming felt like it was going to fix that because when Netflix was new, it was just filled to the brim with indies you'd never heard of. And they got rid of all that as they grew. And now it's, it's now the most coveted thing on streaming is The Office, right? It's long-term sitcoms that keep the eyes glued to the service and stuff. And yeah, I wish I could, I tried fixing it with Discover Indie Film. And I think from my email that we were like at 10,000 people a week, which isn't a ton, but like
that's
that was a
of people,
lot.
yeah,
That was a lot of people. It probably could have grown to 100,000, but then Amazon was like, no, sorry, you can't be free anymore. You have to charge 99 cents an episode or $7.99 for a season of 10. And it's like, it's a bummer because like I do feel like people would appreciate the kind of films that you appreciate, including your own. But how do you get it? How do people even become aware of it?
I think I think about this a lot. I think some filmmakers put their stuff on Vimeo. So Vimeo, it's compared to YouTube, has a little bit of more of a indie filmmakery kind of slant. But even that is still, it's not like, if you made a...
But it's being on a raft in an ocean
it's just so...
with 10 million other rafts.
Right, and a lot of them are still... They're trying to show... it's a pitch for a hopeful Marvel movie or whatever. It's like... And that's a totally other craft, and those people are great at what they do. But this is a totally other thing. It might as well be a whole other type of medium. I think Criterion Channel... is like, I guess, the closest sort of thing where if I'm like, I want to watch something tonight, but I don't know like where to go, like what should I look? I just go to Criterion Channel and just start scrolling. So I think what most people do with Netflix, if I want something mindless, then maybe I go to one of the other streamers or YouTube or whatever. But if I'm looking for a really good movie, I think Criterion is like usually a pretty good gatekeeper of that. But I don't know, and obviously those are going to be the creme de la creme of all time best art films. So where do you find the more recent or small or upper coming? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really great features at our festival over the last 7-8 years, and they're not going to make it onto Criterion.
No, it's just
Criterion's about classics or auteurs, well-known names. I mean. Yeah, it's tricky. It's a bummer.
That feels like Criterion is like the place where, in some ways, I guess like what Sundance sort of is or was, and where it's like, okay, I might not be able to get there now, but that's kind of like the place where if you had your druthers, that's where your thing would end up. And so I think it's useful to kind of that someone's at least doing that, or like the New Yorker for short stories or whatever. Like it's important to have like some place where you go like, okay, this is considered the gold medalist or whatever. But yeah, I don't know. I think also just so many people are making movies that's like a blessing and a curse. There's just way too much video content in the world, and just way too many. In some ways, like. I think the ability that for everyone to be able to make movies is cool because the person who is going to make something awesome now can, but it also encourages all the people that aren't going to make something awesome to also do it. And so you just end up, it becomes much harder to find good stuff. I think things through word of mouth can still like spread, and they still do, but it is definitely, it's just like there's a lot out there.
I mean, you just made me realize... I just thought so our festivals, our two festivals, Filmvasion in June and Sherman Oaks in November, all the films are good. Like, we really do care about the quality of the films. But filmmakers actually come to our festival and are surprised by the quality. Even people making indie films are like, everything in my block was good. Everything I saw tonight was good. And they're surprised, which tells you just how hard it is. Like, you would think those people would be the audience for this. And yet even they are surprised because they're not expecting to see quality because it's so hard to distinguish from the good from the bad, really, because there's so much of it.
And I think also, and maybe this isn't true, but I think if you're making short films, you're probably, a somewhat up-and-coming filmmaker compared to the guys and gals at the highest level making feature films. So probably most of the stuff that you're watching isn't your contemporaries' work. It's the people like generations ahead of you who are making these great or not great or whatever feature films. And it's different than like when I was doing a lot of improv, I would see my contemporaries perform all the time. So you could see them getting better. You could see them dropping out or whatever. You're always seeing your contemporaries working. And I think probably even in the theater, like we go see each other's plays, but it's just when it comes to movies, I guess if a friend sends me their movie that they made, I would watch it, but it may not play at a festival in town. Maybe I'm just watching it like on a YouTube link, and I don't know. It doesn't seem like there's as much of a let's all see each other's thing. We're more just watching the work of people that feel untouchable because they're just at a whole other level of their careers.
True. And I mean, if I was so independently wealthy that I could just make the festival like, if it could be, every other weekend at the theater, just come and watch like kick-ass indies, then maybe you would get people into it and into coming regularly. But yeah, it's a challenge because like you're saying, most people are watching. My God, what is a budget nowadays? I mean, they're watching like $50 to $100 million films all the time. And then, you go to a festival and you see stuff made for pocket change, and I don't know.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to keep up. And I think that it's different than you're seeing a lot of like music in the last handful of years that's made like in a bedroom, because the technology exists. And the same reason why podcasts are like have proliferated is you really can like this podcast is going to be basically the same production value of the most popular podcasts. Like it really is like there's just very little that's needed to do it at that kind of technical expertise. Whereas movies, it just isn't built that way. But books, everyone has the same Microsoft Word. Like there's just not a difference there. But or like if I find a pen and write a book with the found pen versus spending $20 on a pen, it doesn't make my book any better or worse. But if you like the quality of your camera matters, and like the quality of like that hang for certain things, it just matters. So it's one of the things that makes movies so cool because it brings in so many mediums and you can do so many different things on such a high level. But it's definitely one of the drawbacks of the medium. My hope is like there's going to be some sort of like French New Wave-esque like reckoning that happens where I don't know if it'll be like country specific or whatever, but where all of the ease of technology that right now is there's a generation using it primarily to do like YouTube content and like very polished, well-made content, like just plain content. Some people will use that ease of use stuff to make like really interesting art, and maybe like a community will form around that, or critics will take up a group of people similar to what happened with the French New Wave or the Czech New Wave or any of these kinds of like indie, or even the American like indie cinema movement. But even that is like a slightly higher budget than some of the French New Wave stuff. I hope that happens, but it doesn't feel right to say that that is going to happen on YouTube, which is where like if you made some like $0 thing, but that had really interesting ideas, where do you just throw it on YouTube, I guess, and hope it goes viral? It's just like, it's not, or even hope that it just gets seen, not even go viral. It just feels like it's not the right place for it.
Well, and this is a biased statement as a festival programmer, but I think you do need curation, and that's the one thing YouTube won't give you is curation. Like if I wanted to watch a wonderful short film right now that wasn't submitted to the festival and I just went on YouTube and tried to find one, probably not. I'm probably not going to find what I want to find.
You'd have to use some previous curation that you respect. Like you'd have to like if Criterion Channel like put out some short films, or hear all the Oscar nominated shorts, and like that's the best use of the Oscars. At least it's like you go like, all right, well, hopefully these are recommendations of some films that have value for some people. If they're only going to watch a few films, that's supposed to be the purpose of any of these awards, is that it just brings attention to films that are curated to be seen. But it doesn't always work that way, and plenty of things, if they don't fit what that organization is trying to do, then it...
And you just brought up the one thing that chaps my hide more than anything, which is I've always loved shorts. I've always... For years, when you live in LA, there's a theater called the Laemmle Theater, and you can go see the Oscar-nominated shorts, and you get the 5 nominees, and then the other 5 that made up the short list of 10. And I can tell you, since I started programming, so like 8 years now, every time I go see that, out of the 10, I see 2 or 3 great films, and then 7 that are not as good as the best films that were at Sherman Oaks Film Festival. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Even like the Academy really isn't good at curating. I don't know.
I don't know either. But they're definitely not. I mean, I think they're probably pulling from the other other festivals curate first to basically boil it down from the giant masses. So the winners of each of the Miami Film Festival and Atlanta Film, every city's film festival.
The Oscar qualifying, which of course I want my festivals to become Oscar qualifying someday.
Well, that'd be great. Yeah,
because I would love.
You'd put forward a different type of film.
Yeah,
and so that would be exciting. But I don't know. But also the Oscars are like, it is sort of mainstream art house kind of. So like last year, I loved Drive My Car. That was like one of my favorite movies last year. And so that was cool that won the foreign film Oscar. But I pretty much only look at the Oscars for the foreign film list because it helps me boil down, because I don't know all those directors and I don't know all the actors. So I just go like, okay, what are the foreign films that I should see? So I use like the Oscar nominees foreign film list. I'll look at like certain critics I like Richard Brody from The New Yorker, or certain critics that have a kind of like world cinema view of things. I'll be like, what's he watching? And so that's useful to just pick a critic that you like, and they can kind of be your like spiritual guide or like cool older brother through some of these, some of the curating. But I mean, there's been too many times where I'm like, this won the Oscar, that sucks. Like, so I don't know. It's cool, but it's also like you can't be the end all be all, because it just isn't meant for art cinema. It's meant for something more Hollywood than that, which is fine, but just isn't. It is a different thing.
I'm looking forward to your overrated when you do the 4 questions, because I am with you. Obviously, ever since I became a festival programmer, I actually see fewer big films because I just watch so many films that I don't really get a chance. Like, oh my God, I have to see Nope, and I have to see Nope on IMAX, and I'm aware of this. But it's going to be hard to find an evening to do it. But anyhow, what am I saying? I'm saying every year I look at the nominees for Best Picture, and I'm like, well, I at least have to bother to see these, and I'm still disappointed. Like, I saw some wonderful stuff, don't get me wrong, but I'm still like, really, that's nominated for Best Picture, what I just sat through? Like a film that was clearly a good film.
Yeah.
With
always very competently made.
And it's just good.
Yeah.
It's not great.
Yeah. It's not, yeah. And I think some of it has to do with like is it intending to be entertainment or art? And if both entertainment and art is up for the same award, then it's confusing, because then you go like, okay, well, if I'm really sometimes I want entertainment, but sometimes I want art. And if I want art and I'm looking at a list and they don't really make that clear what these things are, then you can end up seeing movies where you're like, this really doesn't do at all what I'm aiming for. So it's not just like all movies are the same.
And obviously, the huge flaw, and like at the festival level, we kind of make up for this by having genres, but the huge flaw of something like the Oscars is that, like, okay, so you're putting 9 films together, maybe a foreign film creeps in there, maybe an animated film creeps in there, but you're putting comedies against dramas, against this, against that. I mein, it's just, and are things intended, things intended to be art housey against, Dune. It just, and it's not fair, right? Because I have some friends, and I actually didn't see Dune because I'm waiting for the second one to come out because I want to watch it all at once. But like, I had friends say, like, I thought Dune was the best film of the year. I'm like, yeah, Dune didn't stand any chance to win Best Picture because it was going to have to go to something more artsy and less commercial, right? So, yeah, it's just a flawed idea of putting everything filmed into the same bucket. And then just plucking some out and saying, these are the 9 best of the year, or these are the 10 best. Like, it's not fair to anyone.
And even, I mean, you go even further and say, like, awards in general kind of, like, miss the point, because it's so silly that, like, they're even competing between these different, like, what's supposed to be art. But that's why I try to look at it as, like, that it might help curate or just like boil down the things that I could possibly watch. That's how I find it most useful. I think when I was younger, I definitely, especially as an actor, I was so inspired by all the winners and their speeches. And I was like, one day maybe like I'll be up there, and like all of these things that I think are useful to an extent because they build up enough passion for a kid to pursue the arts basically and start learning about it. But at a certain point, I think most people like hopefully kind of, it still holds a special place in my heart because it was like as a kid I cared. But I think you start learning like, okay, what is this actually useful to me now in my sort of artistic life or my life as an audience member? And I tried to kind of hone in on like what it could actually help me with.
For sure. Well, hey, we've gone a long distance away from you and your film. So I have an important question. After The Poet and after your experience with it, are you eager to do another? Are you writing? Are you just kicking around ideas?
I'm definitely, I've like tried to write a few things and kind of like haven't followed it through and kind of like got discouraged with it or kind of started feeling like my intentions weren't in the right place. Like I would start, it would get corrupted in some way. So it would get put aside. And I've also been doing more acting lately. So I've been kind of finding myself pulled there, but I do definitely want to do more. I think I could see myself, I mean, I think everyone probably says this, I guess, but like, I think the effort required to make a film is so great that in some ways, once you feel like you have a basic handle on how to do it, I think you should make a feature film, basically, like if you're going to do it. Because unless the idea requires it to be short. Like I think above all, like follow the idea. And I think that's great. If the idea should be a play, let it be a play. If it should be a book, write the book. Like I think that is important. But I think if you want to do movies and what you really want to do is make feature films, but you're too afraid and so you're like making short films or it's too expensive, I'd rather make an inexpensive feature than just keep making shorts, I guess. Because I want to make the thing that I like to watch. So I don't know. So I definitely think I've been thinking about that and how that would even be possible. And I want to do more writing. And I'm thinking about like maybe, doing more writing with friends so that it's not so isolating. But I think I'm at the point now where I'm trying to kind of learn more about what the process would look like for me so that I can make the process as satisfying as possible. So it doesn't feel like I'm just like only writing for like a year to get to the part where I get to start enjoying it. Like I want to try to make the process sustainable. So I'm like, I could just keep doing this over and over. So that's what I'm trying to learn how to do that with the writing.
Right. And the sustainability really kicks in with shorts because as great a short can be, I mean, the shorts that win the Oscar for Best Short, those filmmakers, it's not very common that they get to make another film. Like it's tough. So yeah. So you're thinking more feature-y because of the practical side of your mind too, or just that because you enjoy features?
Well, I watch way more features, so I think that is like.
Of course, you don't have the option to watch shorts. Where are you going to watch?
Right, so that's part of it.
Unless you hop on our jury next time.
Right, exactly.
Which you will be invited to be on the filmmakers board.
So I think that's part of it is that I probably, because I watch less shorts, it's less. It would still be exciting to do, but I don't want to feel like. I didn't like feeling like bad that my movie was too long or whatever in that category. Like I just would like to have some of those constraints taken away where I could make it however long it needs to be without it being kind of an issue. But I also am not opposed to the idea of like a feature film could be a 70-minute film or something. Like I don't know. Like I guess the real answer is I don't know what the next thing is yet, but I definitely don't feel like I feel like I'm just starting out exploring the filmmaking thing. Like I definitely want to do more acting and helping other people's projects because I just really enjoy that. But whenever I do enough, too many of those things in a row and I start getting an itch to do something that feels more personal to me, I'm definitely drawn to film as a medium to do that. It's just usually overcoming the logistical hurdles is the hardest part.
I understand completely. Well, all right. Well, I think that's a good place to stop. Do you want to name your website and social media? No, I won't even get you started on the social media thing. We've actually gone, and this is a compliment, we've gone longer than average, so I don't think we should do like 20 minutes on social media
rant. Yeah, okay.
But
so yeah, I'm not on social media, or I have been, but I'm currently not. So who knows? If when you're listening to this, maybe I will be again, but probably not. My website, I have a website. It's daniel-amerman.com. It's mostly a website for people who are looking to hire me for acting. So on that website, I do have a section where every once in a while, when I finish a short story or this short film, there's an email list on there that someone could sign up for. And whenever I finish a piece and I feel like it's worth sharing, then I'll send that out. But it's the kind of thing that I send out like once every 8 months when I actually have something to share. So, but if you are interested or if you like the short film and want to be aware of future things, that is probably a better place since I'm not on social media.
Absolutely. And I am on social media, and I'm not going to share my personal handle. There's no point. But I am about to rattle off a whole bunch of websites and social media. And first I'm going to say, hey, kindness is a value on this planet. So be kind, like and subscribe to the podcast. And give 5 stars if that's warranted. We talked about Dan's film, The Poet. It's going to be in the Discover Indie Film TV series. Probably by the time you hear this, it should be out because I think we're going to have no problems this time. So anyway, so go to Amazon Prime Video, type in Discover Indie Film, and watch season 6 and enjoy The Poet. And give that motherfucking TV series 5 stars on Amazon. Because so far I think we have all 5 stars, but I have films I love that have been at the festival. I will pay the money even though I've already seen it. Because now actually Amazon does a good thing where you can't review something if you haven't bought it.
Oh yeah.
If it's VOD. So I'll rent the film and then I get to review it. And then a couple of friends will do it. And then there'll be a 1-star review from someone who should have never watched an indie film. They're like, this film looked cheap and I don't know why.
It's not for them.
Yeah, it's not for them.
It's not for them. So who is it helping to take the time to write this review?
And the huge flaw of the internet is that angry people review more than satisfied people, right? I enjoyed that film. I should review it someday. I hated that film. I'm going to go rip its asshole out. So that's my waste of everyone's time asking for good reviews. But yeah, please give the Discovery Indie Film TV series 5 stars. Just be a kind person. And by the way, go to discoveryndiefilm.com to learn more about the TV series and this podcast. And it's at DIF Wins on social media. And you're not listening, but I'm just going to say, if you send at DIF Wins on social media, if you send an Instagram or Facebook message to that, and I read it, and you ask me to review your shit, I'll review your shit. Ooh. I promise. I'll give you 5 stars right back. All right. That's a challenge. Anyway, I gave that info, and we talked about how The Poet was at Film Invasion Los Angeles that we hold every June. You can learn more at filminvasionla.com, and it's at Film Invasion LA on social media. And the sister festival, Sherman Oaks Film Festival, every November. ShermanOaksFF.com, and it's at ShermanOaksFF on social media. And I've done everything I'm supposed to do. There's one last thing to mention, I guess, which is I am not a stoner by any means. But I do enjoy it now and then. And so because I watch almost 2,000 films a year, on April 20th, which is 420, we held THC Cinema at the same theater where we hold the festival. And there's going to be THC Cinema. The 3rd edition will be next year on 420. It's a Thursday. You can get high on a Thursday night. Trust me. I lost money on this sucker, but basically I spent a couple $100 in the end to sit in the theater with 60 other people, high, watching hilarious or visually stunning short films.
That's cool.
And it was a damn good time. In fact, the reason I did a second one was because a filmmaker I really liked, she was sitting in 4 rows behind me, and when the last film ended and the lights came on, she said, "This has to happen again." So there you go. I mentioned THC Cinema, which is thccinema.com and at THC Cinema on social media. Man, 4 social media accounts. It's funny when a friend goes like, can you like this thing on social media? I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll give you 5 likes.
Yes, it's going to take a while, but I'll do it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to keep shifting accounts on my phone. All right. Daniel Amerman, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
And thank you, everyone, for listening.